Yeah, Kickstart got 29th of June, which kind of fits nicely around. We're doing this every 2 months anyway. But that does mean we've got May now, June, something else going on, and then July. We've got the 20th as well. So we're back here, 20th of July. So definitely exciting when they're available. And we've got September and November again, nothing else has changed around at all. So that's just my quick rundown. So whenever we're ready, I'll give you a little bit of time to get going. You ready, Sue? Got your tea? Yeah, you can borrow the code now.
Let me set this up first.
Alright, so, a few minutes. How about Chris? Give us a chat. What's the title of all of it? It was to do with the internet.
Okay, so the internet, the Amiga. A little bit of history to start with. Man's been trying to automate things since time immemorial, really. I mean, when you consider it, the abacus that's greatly in use in China still is a basic calculator, isn't it? Well, more than basic, it's actually quite good. Apparently, the Romans and the Greeks also had the abacus, and I do believe they probably got it from the Persians, who probably got it from the Chinese. Since then, through the years, people have been trying to get better and better. Thomas Babbage in the 1700s came out with the idea for his accounting engine, or whatever you call it. And in 1835, he actually built one, and it worked. So you plunge your numbers in, cranked it round, it was all gears. And out popped the answer, 1835. In 1907, some divers found this shipwreck off the island of Kythera, a Greek island. And so they got all the usual plates and treasures and all the rest of it. And they found this lump of metal, all crusted up. They didn't know what to do with it, so they stuck it in a box and stuck it in the museum. Round about the year 2000-ish, somebody thought, wonder what that is. Seeing as it's metal and crusty, if we start scraping at it, we're going to knacker it. So they put it in an MRI scanner and found it was a set of gears from when this wreck happened. So somebody actually made one, and it's a machine that gives you when eclipses are going to happen, solar and lunar eclipses, when you know, the sea where the planets are and all the rest of it. So that's important for praying to the gods, for a good harvest and all the rest of it. This thing's like more than 2,000 years old. It's a computer, basically. In the 1920s, somebody came out with a water computer, and you fed different colours of water in, and had a different colour in the answer in a different colour of water. But they're all mechanical computers. In 1939, I can't remember the guy's name now, a guy thought, well, let's have a go at seeing what we can do with electronics, which is obviously fairly much in its infancy then. So, 1939, so electronic digital computers, what we're talking about, had their origin in World War II. And of course, World War II, the Dutch in the 30s had invented this machine that the Germans later used for their codes, the Enigma machine. The Poles had invented a way to crack it, and that was the bomber. And if you've ever been down to Bletchley Park, you can see the Enigma machine and the bomber in action there, no problems. It's great. But again, that was a mechanical computer. Well, later on in the war, the Germans sought to improve their Enigma machine, and they came out with the Lawrence cipher machine. They urgently needed a way to crack the codes. So Tommy Flowers, who worked for the post office and several others obviously, came out with this machine called Colossus. Colossal it is. It's about the length of this room, and they put the codes from the Germans on this big punch paper tape and run it round and round and round and round and round. And it's all processed by thermionic valves, or what the Americans call vacuum tubes. And the memory on it is a bath of mercury. You hit it with a hammer and it makes a wave. So the peaks of the waves are ones and the bottoms of the waves are the zeros. You hit it with a certain frequency, you get 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, whatever you get. And providing you carry on doing that and saying, then that's your memory, isn't it? That's, you know. So obviously things went on and on. The Americans got ENIAC and a few other computers. But us, the Americans, those Australia, presumably Germany as well, and Russia, were all experimenting with computers. Yeah, originally, they were massive, these things. So the first electronic digital programmable computer was the Colossus. You could actually program it. And as I said, used to decipher German code messages. Manchester University got the world's first commercially available general purpose computer in February 1951. And that's even before I was born, by the way. And Lyons, the coffee house, in 1951 actually carried out the first routine office computer job. You know, way on back then. So brilliant. Of course, innovation happens all the time in electronics, doesn't it? So valves gave way to transistors, which were again invented in the 40s, late 40s. And then integrated circuits were invented in the 50s. So things were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But those old mainframe computers would have filled the building. They'd have filled the whole of this building, no problems. Can you imagine the bill to power them? Can you imagine the heat that came off them as well? Anyway, so everything gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So 8-bit computers were introduced in the 70s. Intel came out with the 8080 chip. Motorola came out with the 6800 chip. MOS Technologies kind of looked at that, took some bits out and brought out their own 6502. Which is basically a knockoff of the Motorola, but possibly a bit more efficient. The Z80 came out then, and then of course we got things like the PET, the Kim 1, the Apple 1, and then as we stepped on, the Acons, the Speckies, C64, Bit20, C64s. IBM released the first desktop computer in August 1981. A long time ago, isn't it now? An 8-bit computer, not with the PC-80 or XT, I think. So throughout the 1950s and 60s, you had all these, generally speaking, it would be big companies and universities that would have these mainframe computers. But if Joe Bloggs has got a program he wants to run his mainframe computer, and his mate wants to have that program, but he's on a different campus, the only thing you can do is write it to a floppy and walk over or drive over or post over that floppy for the other guy to use. So the Yanks call that sneaking it, you'll have heard the expression. So everybody was really interested in being able to connect computers together. And back in the day, they had things like token ring, all these other different protocols for connecting them together. And Ethernet was the one that won out. That's the one we use today, isn't it? So, yes, eventually computers were networked together. So not just together in America, and not just together within the same university, but they actually laid what they called at the time Pluto, the pipeline under the ocean. They fed this pipeline right under the Atlantic Ocean and connected Europe to the States. But also in the States, the American Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, built their own ARPANET. They, of course, connected that to various universities because they were carrying out all the research projects that they wanted. And they were then connected over to like Manchester University and all the others, Cambridge and Heidelberg or whoever, you know. So we've now got a network of networks. And that became the internet. Not quite as we know it today, but we're getting there at this time, aren't we? So they had to work out how to send files between all these computers using all these networks. And probably a lot of them would have used different protocols in different things like Ethernet or token ring. So they had to be able to talk to each other within all that before they standardized. So the various protocols that came out to share files was Gopher, which is a menu-driven thing. Usenet, people posted messages, and that was the news, basically. BBS systems, I wasn't here in Britain or anywhere where I had internet when BBSs were in full swing. So I don't really know a great deal about them. And FTP, which obviously we still use a lot today. So, Gopher, a menu-driven thing, that's actually from a Linux view, I think it is, rather than an Amiga view. But the original ones would have just been a black screen with white writing, or a green screen, or an orange screen with black writing, or whatever. Menus, so if you wanted to dial into the University of Manchester and get a file, and you wanted to go to the biology unit, and then you wanted to go to the blood bank thing and get their files, you go through a set of menus till you get where you want, get your file, and disconnect because it's bloody expensive, basically. Well, that was Gopher. So, menu-based, designed for file sharing in Internet Protocol networks. Regarded as predecessor to the World Wide Web, because in effect, if you want a file from somewhere, that's exactly what you do now, isn't it? We just dress it up different. In actual fact, if you look down and say you want the latest PyStorm thing, you'll definitely end up going onto a server and down some sort of menu-driven tree where you basically get to the file you want and download it. So it's not really much different. Usenet, so that is an old view of it. Usenet users post messages to news groups. Those messages are what's called a news, and it's very similar to a BBS system. There are still some Usenet groups about on the web or on the internet. Slight difference there. Precursor to internet forums, because obviously that internet relay chat, they're all similar to Facebook, apart from they don't have adverts and all the shit that gets thrown at you. Bulletin board systems. So those of you who did go on bulletin board systems will kind of maybe recognise that a bit. You went on, they did their own ASCII graphics to start with, but then again, you went on, you got your files, or you uploaded your files, and you went on that way. So that was all before we had what we now call the World Wide Web. So the server allows users to connect to the system using a terminal program, which is why it's all black, isn't it? If you ever use terminal programs. Users could upload and download software and data, chat, read news, and eventually FidoNet came out with NetMail, which is early email. So, file transfer protocol, that's AMI-FTP, and it's something that we use, whether we use it in Windows, Linux, Mac, or Amiga, to upload and download files. If you've ever uploaded anything to a website, chances are you'll use an FTP program to do it. So use transfer files from server to client on any network, not just the internet. So it could be your home network, or it could be your college network, or whatever. Now superseded by secure file transfer, everything is secure because of all the malware that you get. And we've had FTP and XFTP for ages and ages and ages. So, World Wide Web, slightly different to the internet. Tim Berners-Lee, he coined the phrase the World Wide Web, and he foresaw it as being not the physical connection, the physical network of networks. He foresaw that as being the way that we get our files, transfer them between computer to computer in an oh-so-gentlemanly, non-commercial fashion. He also wrote the first browser, which he called World Wide Web. Unfortunately, it only ran on Next computers, which is Steve Jobs' company after Apple kicked his arse out. 1992, Mark Andreessen and some others wrote Mosaic. Ported pretty quickly to the Amiga as a Mosaic by 1993, so a year later. And as I said there, at this time, Bill Gates, well, he wouldn't what use the internet was. We've got all the other things, the BBSs. What use can that internet thing possibly be? 1994, Andreessen left where he was working and formed Netscape Communication Corporation and wrote Netscape Navigator, which I'm sure you'll all remember. In 1995, Bill Gates had thought, maybe there is some sort of point to this. So they licensed the Mosaic code and wrote Internet Explorer. So the The first web browser, World Wide Web, there it is. Impressive as anything. No. But it got you what you wanted, I suppose. So that's Tim Berners-Lee. Hold on next. Name later changed to Nexus because obviously being called World Wide Web, that would confuse it with World Wide. And there's a mosaic. Not a very clear picture, the film I could find at the time. So that's our A mosaic. Used as the basis for most of the browsers, really. There were some text-only browsers, and there still are. Going out. We got it as A mosaic in 1993, the first graphical web browser for the Amiga, anyway, really. More powerful than mosaic, because if you remember back in the day, if you wanted to view pictures of, or video, or read a PDF on the internet, you had to have a helper program. You had to go download Adobe Reader or something to view your pictures or whatever. We already had that because we had data types. So we actually had a more powerful browser than everybody else, really, for a while. Netscape Navigator, as you'll remember, the dominant browser for most of the 90s. But you usually had to have something like AOL to be able to get it. It wasn't just free to use. And it did all right, and it kept getting better and better and better. And it wasn't just a browser, it was a whole internet suite. It took care of all the old protocols, you know, the BBSs and all the rest of it. And it even had a section where you could write your own web pages and upload them to your web space. All built into Netscape Navigator. Yeah. But it was bought out eventually by AOL, and they didn't put anything into development, so development just stalled, which basically allowed Internet Explorer to improve itself, which it practically needed to. And eventually Internet Explorer took over. So there's an early Internet Explorer. Yeah, probably one of all the fuss is about. They licensed the code in '94. Because they bundle it with Windows, and most computers are sold with Windows, obviously everybody's got it. So, but if you remember at the time, there were lots of websites that would only work on Explorer and wouldn't work on Netscape. I don't suppose that was intentional at all. Mozilla Firefox. So eventually, AOL cast Netscape adrift, and Netscape went open source. And when they went open source, the Mozilla Foundation got formed, and they wrote Mozilla Firefox. Mozilla Firefox is originally just Netscape Navigator without all the other bits in. So they parted off the email client, and that's Thunderbird, and all the rest of it just got parted off. And they come with Firefox. And when it first came out, Firefox rapidly gained traction. A, it was free, and B, it was pretty good at the time, against bloody awful Internet Explorer, because the later versions of Internet Explorer weren't particularly good either, unless you were just into Windows. And I think they got up to 30-something% of the market share eventually, before dropping back. And of course, since then, there's been other browsers come up, the Chrome and Chromium, Safari on Apple, bloody awful I find anyway, but it never really gained any traction for PC users, but I did try it at one stage and it did. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far, I think. No, we'll do the browsers. So, I'm not really bothered about Chromium and all the rest of them, are we? Or Peru and that. Amiga browsers. So, in the 90s, we got iBrowse, AmiWeb and Voyager, if you remember it. And for a while, because of our data type systems and everything, browsing, if you can put up with the limitations of the limited resolutions that we have, because most of them are still on tellies, and the limited colours that we could use, browsing was as good as anywhere else. I used to browse in my A1200, even after we got a PC. I don't know why. However, yeah, as I say, standards evolve and Amiga browsing development couldn't keep up with modern websites, particularly once CSS came involved. So they don't look right, do they? If you get a website that's got loads of CSS, it'll look weird the way it's laid out. And JavaScript isn't particularly well catered for. So some websites don't even display. iBrowse. For a long time, iBrowse stuck at version 2.4 for about 10 years, I think. And then 2.5 came out. And now we're up to version 3. It's relatively expensive, but it's not bad. It'll do HTML4, unfortunately it's to HTML5 already. It will do some XHTML, which was supposed to be the next big thing, but hasn't really gained a lot of traction. OpenSSL is the secure socket layer that HTTPS uses and SFTP, blah, 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 blah. So it's based, the SSL that's on there is AMI SSL5, which is based on OpenSSL3. That causes a good bit of confusion in certain quarters. But it means you can connect to secure, websites and that. We've got FTP downloads from it. JavaScript 1.6, I think we're a bit more advanced than that on the JavaScript as well. But that does allow it to view most websites. Tabbed browsing came out on iBrowse, way on that. The first browser to actually have tabs on it. They're commonplace now. But first on, sorry, here folks, first here. Customizable GUI layout, yeah. So compatible with all flavours from version 3 upwards of Amiga OS and MorphOS, which is pretty good. AWeb was used by a lot of the magazine covers. A lot of their interfaces were based on AWeb, and it's very, very configurable. And for a while, that was my favourite browser for a good while. AWeb was first shipped with OS 3.9. And has since been made open source. I never got 3.9, I got 3.5, so it must have been downloadable from Aminet or wherever. And I remember browsing with OS 3.5 with it. Does HTML 3.2, so not as advanced as iBrowse. Some JavaScript, frames which are part of the layout, frames and tables are part of the layout. SSL it was, and some Netscape and Internet Explorer features. Voyager. Voyager was quite good when it first came out. It was kind of Netscape, written by Oliver Wagner and distributed by the sadly named Vaporware. But he dropped it after a while, so it never really got a lot of upgrades. So it included tables and frames, so it would have been one of the first few that had decent layout capabilities until they changed. At the time, yeah, it looked like good potential, but iBrowse overtook it quite easily. So there we go. That was our main browsers. And they're mainly what we've got if you haven't got an NG machine. If you went on Google and did a search, you possibly wouldn't even be able to see it if you did it on an 812 or whatever. But I found that if you use FrogFind, it just displays it as a list rather than no adverts. And then gives you clickable links so you can go on and find what you want on it. Written by a guy, Sean Malsey, who's Action Retro. His main focus is on Macs and Haiku. These Action Retro on YouTube. So it lets any old computer, because he focuses a lot on 68K maps, then obviously it's going to work on 68K Amiga as well, and then any other like computers as well. So FrogFind's pretty good, actually. 68K news, written by the same guy, allows you to browse the news in a reasonable format. You know, your layout's going to be all right and everything. Again, written by Sean Malsey. AmiFox has recently been released, if you've all heard about AmiFox. The idea came up from the guy who was on Amitopia TV and was implemented by Old 42, I think I say on there, yeah. they released Amifox. So not in any way a full replacement for Wayfarer or MorphOS or Firefox or any of the more advanced browsers that you do get. The way it works is you send an HTTP request to their server. You can run your own server on a Raspberry Pi or something like that. Their server runs Chromium, and that Chromium sends an HTTPS request to wherever it is you want the page from. It then converts it into a GIF or a PNG with clickable links, and then sends that back to your computer. But it means that you can actually have a web page that looks like it's supposed to look, and you can click on links and you can go and browse the web. The bad bit is, apparently it takes about 4 seconds per click. But their server's in Sweden. No, their server's actually in Germany, I think. That's administered by a German chap. Can't remember his name now. Yeah, on a 060 speed, it's just a wee bit slower than Firefox, provided you're not clicking a lot, I suppose. On a Raspberry Pi, it's much the same. Maybe even a bit faster. Running Play Store, trying to say. On an OCS Amiga, can you imagine, if you're running out, a 14-bit computer, how long it's going to take to render web pages and all the rest of that. But as I said, it uses a virtual Chrome browser around to Amiga backend, no control by Amifox. But it's a great idea. Originally, that idea would come from a program called Web Rendering Proxy, WRP, that was invented by a guy called 10x7 on GitHub. And they've taken his code, modified it so it will work with Amifox, or it will work with iBrowse or AWeb for that matter. And they've backported the stuff to 10x7's side as well. So, that's done in the best spirits of the open source movement and that. It works. You can get a proper web page off it. That's actually Al's blog displayed on Amifox. Send back images to your web page, processes your mouse clicks. Originally, it would display a web page on your monitor. But if you want to go down, scroll down, then it had to send a signal back and get you next bit page. Now it'll let you do the whole web page, and you can scroll up and down it, so that speeds things up massively. On the NG Amigas, we've got NetSurf. Originally that came out for the Archimedes, I think. Made open source and was then ported back to over to the Amiga by somebody who's on the dev team. It works on NG, a little bit slow. It's very, very slow on 68K. I haven't had the pleasure of using it on either. Oh yeah, I've used it on my old A1XE a few years ago. I haven't used it on that yet. So in 2008, we got an Amiga OS 4 port NetSurf. It displays pages okay, but as I say, a bit slow. Now it's a version 3.11 from about 6 weeks ago, I think. NetSurf works on RISC-OS, Unix-like platforms, including Linux, the BSDs, Mac OS 10, which is Unix anyway, and more. CSS cables, so your display's okay. As I say, there is a port for OS 3, which is slow. Timberwolf was ported by the Frieden brothers some years ago for OS 4. It does work, it displays pages. It's very, very, very slow. They call it Timberwolf because there's licensing issues over the name, so they've got around that we call it Timberwolf. Only available for OS 4.1. OS 4 now has OWB. It had an old browser called Oregon Web Browser, which, when it was first ported over, worked okay. Eventually, things move on and it didn't display a lot of websites properly. So somebody made a port, made OS OWB for MorphOS, and then it got ported over to Amiga OS 4. uses a 2013 version of Apple WebKit. So that means basically it's already outdated. It's outdated by 11 years. So most sites are okay, but not every site. As I said, Aros also has a port of OWV, but I don't know if it's the same OWV or if it's the earlier one, Origin. There we go. MorphOS browsers. MorphOS has now got Wayfarer, which is based on the January 2024 WebKit. So it's going to display every site just correctly. I'm deeply jealous of them for that, I have to say. They've got OWB and one called Sputnik, which was built from a 2012, I think, mobile version of Apple WebKit. Yeah, Wayfarer is now to 7.6. So it's pretty modern, very compliant to today's web standards and all those web pages. We do have some text-based browsers. We've got A-Links, which is an Amiga port of Links. There are several browsers called Links. Some are spelled L-I-N-K, so you know, all the rest of it. And one of them actually displays pictures as well on Linux and what have you. Use these. So you can use a text-based browser if you're really masochistic. So there you go. A distributed hypertext browser, it's a browser. It browses the World Wide Web. Fully text-based, runs in a CLI window or on a separate screen, and you can display the graphics but with a helper program and sound. Gemini, I don't know if any of you heard of Gemini. There has been a report on Gemini, I think, in Amiga Addict a couple of months ago. The guy who wrote Gemini, I think 2016 wrote it, he was fairly obviously pissed off with the way that the web's been so much commercialised. It was never meant to be like this, but big business being what it is, that's what we've got. So Gemini is basically a halfway house between the old Gopher and the World Wide Web, in that it's text-based. Introduced in 2019, I was when we ported actually. It's text-based, but it's secure. It's got secure links on it. I ported something in 2021. Yeah, sits between Gopher and HTML. It's secure. Intentionally simpler than modern web browsers, because if you're not going to do all that stuff that lets them throw adverts at you, well, you don't need all that stuff either. So there's only a few lines of code in it compared with, say, Firefox or Chrome. There are some pages. The picture there is from a Gemini browser called Lagrange, which is a Linux one. I've got it on here. It's either black with white writing, or you can get a darkish blue with white or blue writing on it, which looks a lot nicer on my Amiga 1222. One of the guys, a guy called Carl Jekyll, he's the guy who ported it to the Amiga, an Irish fella. He's got a set of web pages that are all Amiga based, so you can actually get on there and, you know, do some Amiga stuff on it. And we're also quite richly endowed with other web programs. They're not all complete web programs. A lot of them are enhancements to what we have got. So at the moment, obviously Mel did this, but we've got general World Wide Web programs and utilities, 500 odd of them on Aminet. IRC programs, 207. And what a lot of those will do is extend the IRC capabilities, probably in terms of file transfers and pictures and stuff. Email clients and utilities, same again, 300 odd. Internet radio and music players, we have quite a lot of those, even though 250 of them. Newsreaders, 79. I suppose most people who want to read news do it in a browser these days. But you used to get it, so it came along in a little strip at the top, like ticker tape. And terminal programs, 117 of them. So we've actually got a lot of stuff going for us on Aminet alone, or OS4 Depot if you're into the next generation Amigas. So we actually are well catered for, if only we can get on the bloody internet to start with. Now, of course, recent developments on the Pi Storm, Michael Schultz has recently announced Wi-Fi for Pi Storm 32, and presumably he'll be making efforts to make the one for the 500 work as well. That means you can then browse the web with our old Amigas quite securely. And because they're on Pi Storm and it can use the HDMI outputs and do RTG, retitleable graphics, we can actually browse the web in quite a capable manner, or will be able to very shortly. So Gemini, sorry, I stepped forward too far there. Oh, no, no, haven't I? Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that. So, well, the end, and thank you for listening.
Great stuff, thanks for that. Mark, we've got a little bit of chat with you, but probably just give it 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Tea in the week.
Everybody breathe.
And then we'll pick up again.
No worries, mate.
Oh, nice.